70年，他把中华人民奴役，还让这片土地变得满目疮痍。全世界投毒制造各种生化武器，我去，他答应了人类命运共同体。三代爆料，携手再有新天道，振兴我中华同胞，兴起了灭共浪潮。壮志冲云霄，看那国旗飘飘，别鸟铁岭河南，神州阳光普照。江山小，血雨遥，谁负谁生出一份笑。风萧萧，人笑陷入潮。太古开天风潮，3年多的爆料， 就是这压死磕，中方实锤，每天都有一点也不嫌多。以美灭共，以共灭共，还得靠我们战友们行动。天佑我中国儿女，共建联邦新中国。黑夜显出我，照亮东方的天。戳破光辉的火焰，我准备了3世多年。越过了死亡幽谷，踏上了灭共之路。总有太多雄剑，不出啊，只剩虚度。听梦想，收归正道。一周踏老子逍遥。苍生笑，热血万丈高。仰天长啸，志英豪。战友们豪气穿云霄，寒武相聚在今朝。我顶爆 The voice of the world, sitting behind the people's side. We are running out of time. Take down, action. Take down the CCP. Take down, action. Take down the CCP. La 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 la.他们的恐惧是我们的武器，我们的胜利。谢谢了，兄弟姐妹们，你们健身了吗？行动，行动，行动！中共，你完了 ！Take down the CCP。
Just beginning, but the games you want to play. Bring it on and now we'll fight to the end. Just watch and see. It's all started, everything's begun, and you are over. Cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all life for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共，
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共，你完了！干灭中国共产党这个 CCP， 才能让我们远离恐惧。Take down the CCP。
They try to scare the nation with fabrication, but we see through the lies. We won't fall, we will fight you back. Police corruption with crooked assumption. They ran our lives, but no more. We will win. We will take down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧，
Let the bullets fly a little
为
longer.
奴役的人
Let
们
the bullets fly a little longer.
行动，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
行动，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
完了
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
，Take it down，
Bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take it down the evil CCP。
Good evening, Fringers. It is Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the episode 27 of The Fringe. I'm your host, David Vincent Bob. The Fringe is simultaneously broadcast in English and in Chinese on gtv.org, MOS Talk, every Tuesday and Friday night from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. We are honored to have you here with us this evening. We thank you and appreciate your patronage. Please spread the word about our show to all of your family and friends and subscribe and follow us again on gtv.org at MOS Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce and welcome tonight's guest who has definitely been moving and shaken with the rest of us on the GTV crew. It's my pleasure to introduce Isla to all of you tonight. Good evening, Isla. Thank you so much for joining me. Great to have you with me again here tonight.
Thank you so much, David. It's always an honor to come back. Good evening, Fringers. This is Isla. I will be your co-host tonight. So, David, I know these days you're actually busy protesting in front of the SEC building, right?
Yeah. Before we get into anything further about what we're going to be covering this evening, Isla's going to share that with you. I'd like to show you all a few photos here. One of them is the first one I like to show. There we are. This is the first time I met Isla. We've done how many shows now? This is our 27th show. I'm not sure how many out of those we've done together, but I had the honor of meeting Miss Isla in Washington, D.C. this past week, and man, was it awesome to see her for the first time in real life. It was like, wow, she really does exist. That was so much fun. Yeah, we hit it off and we talked, and it was just so cool to see you. And instead of on a computer screen, actually seeing you in real life, and it was just a great pleasure to meet you. And we had a really good time. And we both actually, right after we met, Isla got interviewed like almost instantly, or a guy came up to her and started asking them a bunch of questions,
Right.
And they were interviewing. It was kind of an interview situation. And at the same time, I think I was being interviewed by Forrest, So we kind of got separated there. We got to talk a little bit before I left. I had to leave that afternoon, but it was certainly a pleasure to meet you in person, Isla.
Of course, David. Yeah. And I also think you, just like you said, when we got there are pedestrians that, who are interested in, in our protest. And this is probably the very first time that you see a lot of investors actually doing the protest in front of the SEC buildings. So it was definitely a pleasure to, meet you in DC, and we're still doing this program together, David.
Yeah, it's really cool. And for those of you that don't know, quickly, I mean, we don't want to beat a dead horse, and we're still here doing it. We're going at it hard. I noticed the numbers kind of drop. People are always, how it is when something new happens. Everybody kind of wants to see what's happening, and it dwindles off a little bit. But we're still hitting it hard here in New York, and Isla was hitting it hard with me in D.C. But we're protesting the SEC and their collaboration with the Chinese Communist Party, and the difficulty it is for GTV to get on the NASDAQ, on the stock market. So there's a lot going on there. If you don't know about it, just tune in to GTV every single day. As a matter of fact, this Friday, Isla and I will be co-hosting from 9 to 12. Both festivities. Is that right, Isla?
That's correct. So I believe that the protesting is happening every day. So on this Friday, you will also see David and I co-hosting the protest and trying to explain why was it important for a lot of the GTV investors to stand out to doing all of these acts against the SEC's collaboration with the CCP. We'll also introduce more latest info in that program as well.
That's correct. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. And it's been, I'm not going to lie. I think there's another picture here, Chris, right, of me and the brutality of the weather yesterday. It was freezing cold. It was raining. But that's a testament to what, this is all about for us. We're willing to do whatever it takes to get the word out there. And from what I'm hearing, some progress is being made. Lawyers are talking to each other.
Right.
It's moving and shaking going on. We will be on the stock market. It might not be today, but we'll be there. Isn't that right, Isla?
That's correct. And I think GTV is definitely something that's worth investing, and that they are afraid of doing this because we are exposing the truth of all ties in this country with the CCP.
That's right. And that's the biggest problem is with this whole thing is that, first of all, the SEC is listening to this, just laughing, looking at my picture there. The SEC is siding with the CCP, which is crazy because, why would you believe a group of liars? You know what I mean?
Right.
And everybody knows that the reason why the CCP doesn't want GTV to be on the air is because we're telling the truth. All the lies that they spread are exactly that, lies, and we tell the truth. And that's right there, the motto of our show right there, Isla: truth, integrity, and commitment. And that's why they're scared. That's why they don't want us on the stock market. They're trying to damage our good name. But in the end, we have God on our side, and we're going to come out a blazing there with that. So anyway, let's get right into this. I recorded this morning on my little phone here. This is New York City, and this is the rally this morning. So let's roll that video, Chris. Or the protest, sorry.
原理上应该不能停到这儿的。
对呀、
Yeah, and so at the end of the video there, I wanted to show the Freedom Tower. It's so important to me. I mean, it's such a momentous, building, and we all know what it's there for. Some information I never knew, I just found out this week, was the building is 1,776 feet high to commemorate the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and to show freedom, that we are, no matter what tyranny comes across, we're always free, and that's a stark reminder of you can't keep us down no matter how much you try. So Isla, I heard a rumor that I have a big mouth. Is that true?
No.
Well, I can prove it is. It's okay to say that I do. Here's a video of me with my big mouth after the streaming, after the cars went by this morning. Let's roll that, Chris.
Shame on you!
SEC, shame on you!
SEC!
Shame on you! SEC, shame on you!
SEC corruption!
SEC, corruption! SEC, corruption! SEC, corruption!
SEC, shame on you!
SEC, shame on you! SEC, shame on you! SEC, shame on you!
SEC corruption!
SEC, corruption! SEC, corruption! SEC, corruption!
SEC love CCP!
SEC, love CCP! SEC, love CCP! SEC, love CCP!
SEC love CCP!
SEC, love CCP! SEC, love CCP! SEC, love CCP!
Great.
You guys see that our fellow members and the investors of GTV actually went to DC and New York SEC building to do these protests, and I believe the protests would be still ongoing until we had an answers and explanations, or we see some actions from the SEC. So before we move on to the breaking news section, I want to first share some latest data of COVID-19 with our fringers. So latest data says 137 million cases of CCP virus on a global scale. And that means one case every 54 people, and that's pretty scary. So today, the US also pauses Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccines over blood clotting cases. For those who are following our program for a long time, or who have been in the whistleblowers movement for a long time, you may be very familiar with that the definition of SARS-CoV-2 pandemic being an unrestricted biological warfare launched by the Chinese Communist Party. So vaccine won't work against any biological weapon, and more updates on the truth of COVID-19 or the CCP virus can be found on GTV or G News or on the Fringe on Moss channel. So let's roll the first video of our today's topic, please, Chris.
Issuing a stern warning to Beijing, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that the United States is concerned about China's aggressive actions against Taiwan. Blinken warned that it would be a serious mistake for anyone to try to change the status quo in Western Pacific by force.
As I say, we have a deep concern. What we've seen and what is a real concern to us is increasingly aggressive actions by the government in Beijing directed at Taiwan, raising tensions in the Straits. And we have a commitment to Taiwan under the Taiwan Relations Act, a bipartisan commitment that's existed for many, many years to make sure that Taiwan has the ability to defend itself and to make sure that we're sustaining peace and security in the Western Pacific. We stand behind those commitments. And all I can tell you is it would be a serious mistake for anyone to try to change the existing status quo by force.
The White House said it was keeping a close watch on increased Chinese naval activity in the Taiwan Strait and called Beijing's actions potentially destabilizing. The U.S. State Department recently issued new guidelines that will enable U.S. officials to meet more freely with officials from Taiwan. The United States has repeatedly warned China against its aggressive moves near Taiwan. The U.S. says that new Chinese naval activity around Taiwan is a pattern of ongoing Chinese intimidation efforts in the region. Last month, the U.S. and Taiwan signed an agreement to boost cooperation between their coast guards in a move to push back at China's increasingly assertive maritime activities. The U.S. has also been deploying its Coast Guard to the Western Pacific to help allies enforce their claims in disputed waters. Taiwan has complained of repeated military activities by Beijing in recent months. Taiwan says that more than 15 Chinese jets have crossed into its air defense identification zone. But China says that an aircraft carrier group was exercising close to the island. Beijing claims full sovereignty over Taiwan. China has been applying pressure on Taiwan by sending a large number of ships, which it claims to be fishing vessels, into disputed South China Sea. Taiwan is planning to stage live fire drills in the South China Sea later this month amid the spiking aggression from China.
Well, we see, David, that in the video, Blinken mentioned that the U.S. had a bipartisan commitment with Taiwan before the Taiwan Relations Act to make sure that Taiwan and West Pacific area maintain its democracy and peace. Blinken also said strongly that it would be a serious mistake if anyone wants to change the status quo by force. In other words, I believe that the U.S. would stand strongly with Taiwan against the aggression or the potential intrusion from the CCP, right? David, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm on board with everything you said there. You know, something that's funny that stood out that reporter just talked about was how they were saying they were fishing, but what are they fishing for? Whales with missiles? You said missiles flying off those boats, and they're saying they're fishing boats. You kidding me? Like, I don't get it. I just noticed that like as many times I've seen that video. But Blinken, you know, yeah, he's very concerned with these aggressive actions. The thing is are they going to follow through? We already saw what Blinken is incapable of when we had the Alaskan summit. And he pretty much got his, for lack of a better word, he got his butt handed to him by the Chinese there. So I don't think they really take us that seriously, to be honest with you. It sounds to me that we are definitely standing behind Taiwan, though. Talk is talk, but let's walk the walk. And it seems they're doing that, too, because they are taking action. And part of that was with the Coast Guard. So we see that they are definitely taking this seriously. Deploying the Coast Guard is a good step. Let's see what they do next.
Right, David. And I think we've talked about Taiwan issues for a long time, and we all agree on that. What CCP wants is not just Taiwan. What CCP ultimately aims at was the global domination. So Hong Kong was a starting point if we think about what had happened in the past 2 years, and now CCP actually targeted Taiwan. So if the Communist Party actually succeeds its intrusion or aggression in Taiwan, then the world would experience what Hong Kong people had endured in the last 2 years. And of course, Japan, the US are also the next targets. So another thing that relates to the US-Taiwan relationships is that recently the US just confirmed that they will resume the official diplomatic interaction with Taiwan, with its Taiwan representatives here in the United States. They also say that all of these diplomatic changes are actually under the acknowledgement of the One China policy in the past. So that's kind of like, brought me to think of one question. Since we're talking about One China policy here, then that means there's only one legitimate government that could represent China, and which probably means that the US is already questioning the legitimacy of Chinese Communist Party. What are your, some of the opinions on that, David?
Yeah, I think we should always be questioning the legitimacy of the CCP.
Right.
They are not legitimate. We know from past experience, like you said in the past, Isla, is from what China is known for, what the CCP is known for is just lies. They just basically they go back on their word. They show their force all the time. like they're doing with Taiwan here, bullying, other countries, which is part of their MO, their modus operandi. They love to be the bully to the rest of the world, and they're making no qualms about it. And they're doing it here with Taiwan, and they're constantly doing it. Again, it sounds like we're standing behind Taiwan. That's great. And to me, this is just China making excuses for why they are who they are, just like they do for everything else that they do. And I think the CCP to me is all talk, no walk. They're just bullying them around again, like I said, and flexing their muscles. If you stand up strong against the CCP, they usually back down. I think they definitely have a plan for world dominance, but they're also a country and they're also a government that you can stand up to. And I think they would back away a little bit. They're not scared of us right now because, like I said, what happened with the Alaskan summit. They're not afraid of Biden because you can't walk up a set of stairs without falling down. It's to them, we're a joke, pretty much. And we need to start doing what Blinken's saying that we're doing and start showing our dominance and our strength. We are still the #1 country in the world as far as economic go and strength. So strength of military especially. So we have to just grab a pair and just step up to the plate and start showing our dominance right back to China. I think, again, Isla, like I said, the U.S. Showing up in the South China Sea is definitely a great step in that direction.
Right. I agree on that, David. And I think many people, especially for Chinese audience, they may notice that even before a long time ago, ever since after Xi became the president of China, of the Chinese Communist Party, he actually planned, he actually had a long-term plan on taking over Taiwan. So this isn't something that strange or unfamiliar with the Chinese people or with Taiwan people, but this is something that we are facing and very challenging, probably in the near future, that we already see that Taiwan was threatened, especially by the military, by the CCP's military.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on to our next topic?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're going to talk about next, and Chris is going to roll this one for us here, is we're going to talk about Myanmar a little bit and how the post-coup civilian death toll has climbed past 700. So let's roll that one now, Chris, please.
Night and day they gather in defiance of the military. Candles in hand, these protesters continue to rally for a return to democracy. And the anti-junta slogans are echoed across the country, like here north of Mandalay. Revolutionary songs are belted out under the collective sway of cell phone flashlights. For more than 2 months now, the people of Myanmar have been fighting the military's February 1st takeover, be it by holding up a three-finger salute, splashing red paint in anger over the bloodshed, or distributing underground newsletters. The Burmese people keep fighting, and at great risk. A non-profit helping political prisoners said over 3,000 people have been arrested and 700 killed by the military. The junta, though, claims less than 250 have died. After initially scrambling to form a movement, an armed resistance has begun to emerge, be it among everyday citizens or by armed groups representing the already many factions in the country. Outside the northern town of Mamok, intense fighting broke out between the Kachin Independence Army and the military. And in the Shan state, the Tang National Liberation Army, another ethnic militia, attacked a police station, killing, according to local media, over a dozen officers. On the diplomatic front, though, little progress has been made.
Geopolitical competition in Myanmar will make it very difficult to find common ground, as we have witnessed again and again. But we have a duty to try.
According to the EU's High Commissioner, China and Russia have been blocking any talk of a collective arms embargo. And by refusing a unified UN response, any incentives, like greater trade with Europe if democracy is returned, have also been thwarted.
This is very important, what's happening here in Myanmar, and we're going to talk about this later, too. As the topic of our show tonight is how we have a new axis of evil forming. It's already formed, basically, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But Myanmar is definitely in the mix because of that, and it's their military that's been collaborating with China. So we will talk about that shortly near the end of the show, kind of like a capper to this, what this show is really all about. They've been fighting now for more than 2 months, and it's pretty horrific what's happening over there. But you know what? In light of all that, it's always you gotta put your heart out there and say a prayer for those people that are fighting for their freedom. You know, it happens all over the world. It happens from time to time. We do it here in America. We fight for our freedom, and we're doing it right now. We have a government right now that's trying to take our, worked really hard on stifling our First Amendment right, freedom of speech, when Donald Trump was in office by actually, shutting down the president on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. We dealt with that. Obviously, we haven't dealt with anything as serious as what's going on in Myanmar right now, but it could have turned into that. And we saw what happened with the insurrection at the Capitol, which they blamed completely on the right. We all know that there were some other bad actors at play with that one. We won't get into that, but it's it's freedom, and it's worth the fight. And like the people in Hong Kong are going through the same thing, like you spoke about earlier, Isla. And later again, we're going to talk about how the Myanmar military has a collaboration with the CCP now. We're talking 3,000 arrests, 700 dead. The junta said there's 250, but you know what? You're going to believe that, first of all, and second of all, regardless of them trying to water down their numbers. The death of one innocent civilian or 10,001 is reprehensible. You can't have that happen, and I think this is a powder keg. Everything, this thing's about to explode, and we need to really keep an ear to the ground, as they say, and watch out with what's going on with communist China, because they're involved. They got their hands in this, and they're knee deep in all this. So, what do you think about all that, Isla?
Yeah, right, David. I think it's very important to mention that behind all of the chaotic scenes in Myanmar was the CCP. CCP is trying to creating such a chaotic thing in every country now in the world. I really appreciate that you compare Hong Kong, what happened in Hong Kong in the past, and with what happened in Myanmar today. And for a lot of our audience, I think we all are very familiar that all of the things that we saw today in Myanmar are actually so similar to what we saw in Hong Kong, and what we saw in our memories in 1989 at Tiananmen Square. So these are all of like the same patterns or the same methods that the Chinese Communist Party applies to its own people. And what we see is right now, the authoritarian regimes, all of these dictatorship regimes, they're actually setting the example for other Western countries. They're saying that, hey, if we are like being a dictator, if we're being the authoritarian regime, once I control the military, I control the country, I do whatever I want to suppress my people. And this is very terrifying to see that things have gone worse now. And we also noticed that the U.S. actually announced the decoupling from Myanmar until the government or until this country can come back to its own people. But think about Hong Kong. How many sanctions had the U.S. done with Hong Kong, and what is the current situation of Hong Kong today? David and I are talking about decoupling from Communist Party, decoupling from Communist China for a long time, but we haven't seen a memorable point that we can say that this can be powerful enough to stop its violence or to stop its resources, financial resources of the Chinese Communist Party. So I think the same applies to Myanmar, despite the decoupling did happen, but the chaotic things had never been stopped. So we will keep an eye on this issue and pray for all of the Myanmar protesters and students on the streets. David.
Yeah, I really like what you say about control the military, control the country. That's true. Look at what Adolf Hitler did. I mean, he had the Nazi party, the military, and they took over that country. And look what they did to, how many millions of people died because of his reign. And that's what we need to look at. We need to, there's a very famous quote. I'm not sure who said it, but I've heard it and I've used it many times. Those who ignore the past are doomed to repeat it. And that's how it goes. You want to ignore what Hitler did, you're gonna find out that China is trying to, or the CCP is trying to do the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, and we have to differentiate again. I try to do this every episode. People, The Chinese are not the CCP. The Chinese population is not the CCP. They are controlled by the CCP. And that's one thing we need to, always remember, and I always try to bring that up every episode. When I do mention China and what's going on in China, we have to talk about the country, but you have to always remember to always differentiate between the party and the people. The Chinese Communist Party controls the people of China, and they really have no say. So they just kind of go along with what they're supposed to do. A lot of them are brainwashed, and some of them even like it. They just, they like being controlled, but we don't roll that way here in America. We love our freedoms. So we need to definitely keep an eye on that one. And that was a great piece there, Isla. So let's move on now to the boycott of the Olympics this year. We have a professor. I want to show this video here. It's a professor. His name is Burton. Professor Burton from Syracuse University, professor of sports management. Let's take a look at that video right now.
Given the historical facts, what's happened in the past, what are you expecting Washington to do?
Well, I'm really not expecting them to boycott these games. I think the President of the United States, Joe Biden, is someone who appreciates the importance of the Olympics, and he loves sports, I think, in much the same ways that John Howard, when he was Prime Minister of Australia, loved sport. And I think we've got a bitter taste still in our mouths as a country from having boycotted the games in 1980. So I'd be very surprised if it happened in 2022.
Still, we continue to have these talks and debates. We have more activists also pressuring sponsors to drop the Beijing Olympics. What will all of this controversy around the Beijing Olympics do to, say, sponsorship and what it means for the Olympics in 2022?
Well, controversy is not unknown to the IOC. Almost every games that they stage is met by protests, and it varies from country and the era of the day. I think that the IOC and the National Olympic committees of the various countries that are involved have really learned how to kind of go through this political minefield. It's never comfortable, but I think it's something that they've all come to expect and understand as a part of having something as big as the Olympics and viewed by as many people from around the world every 2 years when the games are held.
So does this continue to be, a viable risk to be taken by sponsors?
I think so. I think they know that there are very few properties, sports properties in the world that reach as many countries as the Olympics does. When I was the chief marketing officer for the U.S. Olympic Committee for the 2008 Summer Games in Beijing, I think we had 205 countries that marched in the opening ceremonies. And the games, I think at that time, were seen by something in the vicinity of 4 billion people saw some portion of the Olympics. I think that when you're a sponsor and you can have that kind of involvement by the world and be seen by that many people, your sponsorship becomes pretty relevant.
So, of course, we are just over 100 days out from Tokyo. We continue to see Japan in various parts struggle to get a lid over the virus, right? Given that there are no foreign visitors, given just the huge amount of controversy and kind of drama going into whether or not these games will go ahead, has the shine been taken off the Olympics brand somewhat?
It's a really great question, and I'm not convinced that it has. I think you will find people who can say that, but I believe the Olympics are so special. I mean, it dates back to 776 BC. This is something that has really been a part of the world, for so many years, and that's an understatement. These games manage to go on, and they manage to thrill us because of the things that happen. We see world records. We see the world's best athletes, not just one country's athletes. And even with the World Cup in football, you really only see a handful of countries there. These are games that unite the world, and I think that's the IOC's mission. And they frequently seek to be seen as a peace organization that actually spreads a goodwill of its own sort across the world.
Rick, why couldn't the IOC delay it another year, given that you have to put so many restrictions on the games this year, not to mention that public sentiment across Japan doesn't seem to be too favorable?
Well, you start to back up into other games. So you've got Beijing in 22, and then you've got Paris in 24, and you've got a lot of investors who are looking for ways to get their money back out. In other words, their return on investment. And I think the challenge for the IOC is they've already been postponed once. They don't want these games canceled in any way. And I think they're willing to do almost anything to try and stage these games, because a cancellation is going to be ruinous for, I think, a lot of countries and a lot of companies.
David, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, everyone. So it's pretty apparent that Professor Burton is a professor of sports management and not of humanitarianism. That was one of the most ridiculous interviews I've ever seen in regards to whether we should have the Olympics or not. Now, I guess because of what he specializes in, sports management, that he would, side on, the fact that we should have the Olympics. But there was nothing that he talked about in there that had anything whatsoever, no relevance whatsoever to human life. And that's what this is all about, Isla. Biden appreciates sports. Who cares? He doesn't appreciate human life. That's what this is about. That's what the boycott's about. The boycott's about boycotting the CCP because of a virus they created that destroyed millions of lives all over the world, and because of what they are doing right now to the Uyghurs in the Xinjiang province. I mean, we're going to talk about that next. It's going to be actually a nice segue to our next story. But this infuriates me that this man talks about this like sports are way more important than humanitarianism. That's just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in reference to why we should have the Olympics. If anything, he made every single argument as to why we should not have the Olympics. And the craziest thing is, I guess I could believe that since he's, completely lost and, that Biden is completely lost, for what's happened at the border, that he probably, he created that mess. So, he being a humanitarian is probably last on his list, too. Let me tell you something, Isla. If we do not boycott this Olympics, it is a huge disgrace to this entire country. And it shows a huge weakness in our government that we do not care about humanitarian issues. Like I said, first of all, COVID-19, they created in the lab, and the genocide of the Uyghurs. Why should we have the Olympics and celebrate this in a country that's doing this to people all over, not only within their borders, but all over the world? That's so ridiculous to me. To me, this boycott is essential, and it makes a statement that we need to begin or to continue to decouple from the CCP and from China. Olympics are so special, he said. You know what, Professor Burton? So is life. Life is special, man. That's what this is about. And he also says these games are to unite the world. I don't agree with that. How did the virus unite the world? How is what they're doing to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang uniting the world? If anything, it separates us from them. We need to separate ourselves from them and decouple from them. And this is the way you do it. And I've said this before. I'm furious that the U.S. is taking a stance, Isla. I really am. There's no reason whatsoever that these Olympics should be held in China this year or any year until the CCP is taken down, period. Why would the rest of the world, again, want the Olympics in a country that created a virus that killed millions and that has genocide occurring within their own borders, Isla?
Right, David, I completely agree with you on that topic. And I think if you're thinking about the number of COVID cases, if you're thinking about the crime that the Chinese Communist Party had committed against the humanity on the Xinjiang genocide issues, then the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics sounds like so absurd. Olympics aren't designed for any time of pandemics in human history, and the host country of Olympics shouldn't belong to a country where its regime committed genocide issues and launched an unrestricted biological warfare to the whole world and to its own people. So I think it wasn't that surprising to see that Professor Burton at Syracuse University actually made such claims. While I think if you listen carefully enough for his absurd interview, you find him visited Beijing in his lifetime before. And he might even support CCP, who knows? And it's really easy for the Chinese Communist Party to find someone who support them in this country to say stuff like this. But still, up to this point, I don't think that the U.S. would allow Beijing Winter Olympics to take place. And David was 100% correct that if this do happen, then this is such a disgrace of the United States. It's such a disgrace in the human history as well. Also, I want to, trying to let our Fringers to do some fun imaginations here, as a lot of people know that since the Xinjiang genocide issues kind of have brought to hot topics in China currently, many brands such as Nike, Adidas, and H&M actually boycotted the Xinjiang cotton, and it actually brought the CCP to do mosaics on TV programs because all of their pop stars, their sports players, they are wearing Nike t-shirts or wearing Nike shoes. And think about if Beijing Winter Olympics do happen in Beijing, in China, what will the TV program be look like? Will they, try to cover all of the Nike logos? Will they try to cover the t-shirts of the athletes? It would be such a joke in 2022 to see that CCP is still holding the Winter Olympics, and we have to take them down even before the Olympics happen. David.
Yeah, I just want to cap that off with one thing, and it was something that he said that I want to reiterate a point about. And he said these games are to unite the world. Don't get it wrong, Professor Burton. I want to make something very clear to you. The only reason that the CCP wants to continue to have these Olympic Games is, and you know this too, Isla, listen to this very closely, everyone. The only reason that the CCP wants to have these Olympic Games is to spread their propaganda. That's all they want to use this for. This is a platform for them to spread their lies, their deceit, their dishonesty about who they really are to the rest of the world. They're going to try to pull the wool over your eyes, tell you how this amazing country that they have, and it's all lies, all of it. That is all the Olympics are for to the Chinese Communist Party, is to spread propaganda, just like Adolf Hitler did during those Olympics.
Exactly. Beautifully said, David. I think things we've already mentioned, Xinjiang genocide issues, why don't we just move on to our next video? I think this is a video that's specifically concerned about the Xinjiang genocide, right? So Chris, please roll that video for us.
Look, I want to ask you both about the press conference, this bizarre press conference that the Chinese embassy in Canberra held this week. The Chinese ambassador insisted Uyghurs were not subject to oppression. It was highly choreographed. It was trying to blame the media for misrepresenting the situation in Xinjiang. Catherine, what did you make of this? I mean, who would possibly believe this? It was the most unusual piece of propaganda.
Well, it was certainly a bizarre press conference, and I don't think it's anything anyone in our press gallery would ever have experienced or seen before. It's pretty, it was quite bizarre. I think it's not the actions, frankly, and what we're seeing in Xinjiang province with the Uyghurs. It's not the actions of a responsible, mature global power, and I think that press conference reflected that. I think it's incredibly important that China be called out on these issues, that we ensure that there is truth and transparency about these issues, and it's in China's long-term interests as a mature global superpower that it actually behaves as a good international citizen, and I don't think that press conference reflected that at all.
Andrew, the committee that you chair released a report on domestic violence, on family violence during the week or a week ago. It had very little media coverage, just despite the focus on these issues in Canberra. One of the fascinating recommendations in your report was that there could be a database, a public database of perpetrators of domestic violence. Why do you think this would be a good idea?
Well, Shari, there were 88 recommendations of the committee. There was a bipartisan report, which was very heartening to see both sides of the political fence come together on this very important issue of family, domestic and sexual violence. The issue of a publicly searchable database is certainly something that is going to be up for debate as to whether it's a good thing or not. But the committee felt that if we just keep doing what we've always been doing, then we're going to get the same results. We need to be trying new things, and the committee was of the view that...
this would be a database of people who've been charged, though, not just allegations. Well,
no. People who have breached domestic violence orders repeatedly, so recidivist offenders. We feel that victims should have a right to be able to go to a database and check a database as to just what they're getting into a relationship with someone. And what we've seen through the committee was that domestic violence doesn't just happen in isolation. It generally happens over a long period of time with multiple partners. So it's important for subsequent partners to be able to be prepared, pre-warned about what an offender has been up to in previous relationships.
And this definitely would have helped in the case of John Edwards, who, of course, shot dead his 2 children. Terrible, terrible case. Andrew Wallace, Catherine King, thank you both very much for your time tonight.
One thing I saw here, Isla, was, I don't know if when they showed that video in the beginning, I don't know if you noticed in the background, it had them sitting at the table, and behind them was a gigantic screen, and in Chinese characters, it also had, I'm glad it had the English subtitle. I never caught this. Xinjiang is a wonderful land, like it's Disney World or something. I can't believe these people. You go ahead, you say what you got to say, and then I want to listen to what you have to say about this first.
Right. Well, first of all, I think to be defined as genocide, that means CCP had a long-term plan on how to control or even suppress Xinjiang people in mainland China. And what we see that the Communism Party or communism itself suppresses any form of freedom of religious beliefs. And that's what exactly happened in China today. And I have to tell you that I have personally been to Xinjiang, and I saw that camp, and it was so shocking for me at that time. And I can tell you one simple fact, David. If you have ever visited Xinjiang, and if you go to McDonald's to get, French fries or get a hamburger, you will need to go through the security check to do that. Could you even imagine on that? That's how Xinjiang people live for their entire life. That's how the Chinese Communist Party treated its own people. And a lot of Uyghur people know that they have been surveillanced 24/7 by the Chinese Communist Party. And for the people who are detained in that concentration camp, they rarely had a chance to flee from there in their entire lifetime. And last week, surprisingly, CCP actually mentioned its genocide issues in China's propaganda news. But what they say is that they actually sentenced 2 Xinjiang officials to death because they once tried to help those people who are detained in that camp to flee from there. And the CCP believes that these are the 2 officials that collaborates with the Western governments to prove that the Chinese Communist Party commit Xinjiang genocide issues. And I think that at this current moment, the CCP knows very well that there won't be a U-turn on the attitude of how the world view Xinjiang genocide issues or how the other governments view these issues. So that's why they kind of strengthen all its propaganda, and they try to threaten its own people, not only the Uyghurs, but also its own officials, to say, hey, we have an eyes on you. Don't you try to help more people. Don't you try to collaborate with other governments, otherwise you're sentenced to death. And this is what exactly they do every time in their historical points. And this is what exactly that happened in the past 70 years, ever since they took control of this country, David.
Yeah, I want to go back to Xinjiang is a wonderful land. Here's what happens in the wonderful land of Xinjiang, people. Rape, torture, murder, abortions, sterilization, slavery, and all your freedoms are taken away from you and stripped from you. The Uyghurs are held at these camps because they're Muslims. And it's a racist move by the CCP to do this. They feel like because they're Muslims, they're all terrorists. And they feel like if they can get them into these reconditioning camps, which we all know are concentration camps, that they can change them and make them into good, law-abiding Chinese citizens controlled by the CCP, when really all the CCP wants to do is just make them into communists. And this just blows my mind. This entire meeting was a gigantic, bizarre joke, like they were saying. And the poor lady, she mentioned that all we really need to get is a little truth or transparency from the CCP. Let me tell you something, lady. You're never going to get truth or transparency from the CCP. Not now, not ever. It's never, ever, ever going to happen. They base their entire government is based on lies and deception. You are never going to get truth, and you're never going to get transparency. Just forget about that. That ain't going to happen. And again, I'm not surprised by this at all, that the CCP is saying the exact opposite of what's really going on. Hey, if that's not what's going on, then let's go over there and check out these concentration camps. But you gotta, you need tanks and an entire military just to check it out and see what's going on there. You can't get in there into their wonderful land of Xinjiang. Just still can't believe that they had that up on the screen and they're spreading this fake propaganda about what's really going on over there. But you know what the cool thing is, Isla, if there's anything cool that comes out of this, is the rest of the world is finally starting to wake up to this, which is great because that's what we need. That's what needs to happen. And like I said, this kind of backtracks to what we were just talking about. It's the main reason, one of the two main reasons we need to boycott the Beijing Olympics is because they're doing this to these people. It's something that's been going on for a very long time. It's just not coming to light. And you got to put your humanitarian ideals in front of money. And that's the problem. People see China and they see cha-ching dollar signs. That's got to stop. We can survive on our own without China. We don't need the Olympics in Beijing. We have to decouple from them. We can survive on our own. Just put Donald Trump back in office. I'll show you how to do it. Made in America. That's what it's all about. So we will always, always keep a close eye on what's going on in Xinjiang, as it is right now one of the hottest topics in this world, and something that definitely needs to be addressed. And that's going to take us right into our final segment here, and which is what this entire episode's been based on. Everything we've been talking about is kind of building up to this one moment where we have something happening in this world that needs to be addressed. It needs to be looked at very seriously. And I call it it's known as the new axis of evil. And to inform you a little bit more about this, Chris is going to play a video for us. Would you roll that for us, Chris? Thank you.
Here we are, tearing ourselves apart for this past, 6 weeks, with sex scandals, real ones, exaggerated ones, and invented ones. But while we're focused on our groins, the world, you might not have noticed, is getting more dangerous very fast. So fast that last week showed us that there's now a new axis of evil, a fast-forming alliance between countries that don't believe in democracy, and they're aiming themselves, this alliance, at countries like ours that do. Just last week were 3 very significant meetings that should scare us. The first of them, a meeting between the Russian and Chinese foreign ministers, where both attacked the United States, which Russian President Vladimir Putin then announced in a national broadcast as racist and genocidal. And this is Russia, which murders democracy activists, getting closer to China, a dictatorship which bans democracy completely. And both of them telling the West, your day is done. The second meeting between China, again, and Islamic fascist Iran, promising economic cooperation so Iran can survive the economic sanctions put on the West to stop it building an atomic bomb. Again, the same message. Democracies in the West, like us, we can't tell these dangerous autocracies what to do. And the third meeting between Russian military bosses and the new military dictators of Myanmar, who at that very same time were shooting dead hundreds of democracy protesters in Myanmar, even children being killed, a 13-year-old boy. What a difference here. We had our top general last week condemning Myanmar's military for murdering civilians. But Russia's deputy defense minister last week, he got a medal from the Myanmar army's chief for supporting these same bloody dictators. This is the world we are now in. Dictatorships, terror regimes, autocracies, all coming together now very fast to resist the democratic West that is getting weaker. The shape of the next worldwide conflict is taking place in front of your eyes. I mean, China is so playing us now, so exploiting our weaknesses. You take its Consul General in Rio de Janeiro. Li Yang isn't even a top Chinese diplomat, yet even this guy, a mere Consul General, feels free to publicly mock us. He tweeted, "The cases of sexual crime happening in the Australian Parliament are shocking. This relates to the protection of women's human rights, and Australia should accept unrestricted international investigations into those cases."
You know, how about that for an eye-opener, Isla? Oh my God! When I saw this, I was like, "Wait a second." You see, that's why I love Australia, because they're they're in the same boat with us. You know, the news that they report is the truth, like we report, and it's those things like this story that I found to be so important, because you almost get like with the Fringe, you know, I'm going to report on this, and this, and we talk about this and that, and you say this and that, and we kind of lose focus on what's really happening over here, what the big picture is. You know what I mean, Isla? We have ourselves in America, we're so focused on what he said, on our groins, and what he's talking about is how the only thing that's important right now to this administration is making sure that we give men who say that they're women the same rights as women. It's absolutely absurd. I've been saying it from the beginning. There's so many people that are against it, and we're fighting these little mini wars of this ridiculous nature. Woke America, the BLM. From the beginning, I've been saying this is a Marxist organization by two lesbian black women who hate men, basically, is what it is. And right now, you know what the BLM's doing right now? You know what the top news is for BLM right now? Isla? They're buying $1 million homes all over the U.S. and all over the world. They're paying for these $1 million homes, and they're lavishing themselves with gifts. I've said it from the beginning. I said they're Marxists and they're acting like capitalists, and that's exactly what they're doing. And it's unbelievable that we spent this much time and wasted this much energy on the BLM, focusing on sexual orientation, woke culture, cancel culture, that the real world all of a sudden just escaped us. And then I got the hammer to the head, and I got the wake-up call from this awesome anchor on this awesome channel in in Australia. I'm sorry, New Zealand. Sorry about that. And Australia. Is that all we care about in the U.S. is PC, you know, and the status quo, rather than our own safety. And it's okay for a man to say that he's a woman, and then he can go to the bathroom in a woman's bathroom. And we're focused on all this crazy little pockets of ridiculousness all over. And we forgot about one important thing. And that's what's leading up to what this entire night was about. Is that Russia, China, Iran, and Myanmar in the backdrop, we're all getting together to form this axis of power that's going to challenge the rest of the world now. And this is it right here. If anyone was not akin to what's going on, and I got to be honest with you, I kind of been focusing on all these little topics here in the U.S., and I myself lost focus on the big picture also, Isla. And that's what's happening behind the scenes. And it's what China's doing with these other countries, this axis of evil. And it's going to cause World War III if we don't do something about this right now.
Right, David. I think one thing is that I don't think that the U.S. would fear CCP itself, but I think the whole world would fear if CCP do build allies or tries to build the ties, which they already fund that with Iran. Like you mentioned, Iran, Iraq, North Korea, Russia, and Communist China. These countries are imposing great threats to all of the freedom lands out there. One thing that I found really interesting is think about how President Putin kind of responded in the early 2020 election. He's almost the last one to say congratulations to Biden until early January. He even said that you have to wait, wait to see like who would be the legal president after an election. And we all know that the election fraud made where we are today. So I doubt that the Russia would stand with the CCP in the very last second. But here are their allies. Here are the ties that they already formed. The term like the new axis of evils also makes me think of something that I read in history in our history classes. So think about like what's the last time the U.S. officials used this term on a TV program, because it's a strong term, right? And the term was originally raised in 2002 by George Bush, pointing to countries who support terrorism, including Iraq, North Korea, and Iran at that time. And we all know what happened after, right, David? The Gulf War, right? So I think at one point, I don't want to say this, but it sounds like military confrontation may be inevitable between the Chinese Communist Party and the other Western countries. I don't know what's your take on that, David. Do you what's your understanding of that term being used, of that strong term being mentioned again in these days?
Well, what I think is, is what you said, and that's a great correlation in to say that they used it, during the Iraqi war, and we saw who was involved with that, is that it looks like they're drawing the line in the sand. These powers are all getting together and they're saying, here we are. They got a plan. They're drawing a line in the sand. There's probably some stuff behind the scenes going on with them, but they're picking sides. It's like a basketball game, pickup game. I want this guy, I want that guy. All the evil alliances are all, it's the evil axis of power is getting together like World War II. Yeah, this is some scary times right here, and I'm glad again that I saw this, because it's something I think we all need to focus on now. This makes the Olympics seem not important at all, really, to be honest with you. I didn't think it was in the first place. I like to watch the Olympic Games, but it's just been since I knew it was in Beijing, it just didn't seem like something that was even worth it. So these things, all of this, just seemed like even when they were happening, these little things, the BLM and Antifa and cancel culture and woke and all this crazy garbage that we were so saturated with by the mainstream media is going on. And we have these countries over here forming these world powers together, this axis of evil, to what looks like they're gonna, they're making a move here, and and it's going to happen sooner than later, and it is dangerous, Isla, and it is something that we need to start focusing on. We need to stop worrying about, gender bending and mansplaining and woke cancel blah blah blabbage, and just get to the real deal here. We have something going on here that we need to be involved in, and we need to start fighting against. And we're so concerned with all these stupid little things in America that the big things that are going on are out of our reach now and falling away from us, and it's making life very, very dangerous for everybody. And that's where this whole episode was leading up to this moment, and is something that we definitely need to pay attention to from this point forward.
Right, David. I also want to think. I also want to say that we are at a very crucial moment of taking down the CCP. Think about the situation, with the CCP and Taiwan. Think about the U.S.-Taiwan relationships right now. Think about how COVID cases have risen up again in the spring, and think about all of the new terms that are popping up on the TV programs. We heard that the new axis of evils, and this is a very powerful term that usually this term came out as something bad would take place in history. That's what we learned from the books, and hopefully, I have very high confidence that we all can take down the CCP, but it's the matter of time. It's also the matter of how much cost that we would pay in this process. So I just want to, wrap up here as we may go over time a little bit tonight. But I think we do need to, keep an eye on all of these topics that we mentioned. And for sure, I'm thinking that the CCP will acting more and more crazily in their finishing days. David.
Yeah, that's a good way to wrap it up there. And yeah, I just want to say that this virus is created in lab in Wuhan, China. It killed plenty of Russians, plenty of Iranians,
right,
plenty of Burmese, and these guys want to say, hey, we killed all your people with this virus. Why don't you side with us and take over the world? And you know what the craziest part about the whole thing is? It's just these other countries too that are forming this axis with China. China's going to end up, if they did take over the world, it would be China's going to be in charge of them too. Everything is just a stepping stone to China to get to that ultimate goal of world domination. Yeah, you'll be your buddy today, but tomorrow they're going to be fighting against each other. And maybe that's what'll happen. It'll all implode because they'll all realize, well, China, yeah, the CCP really is bad. Duh. I'm trying to tell you that, you're not listening. Watch the Fringe every once in a while. Anyway. Thanks so much for joining me tonight, Isla. I really appreciate it. Again, for everybody that's just tuning in first time or anyone that's been here before, we really thank you so much for joining us. Again, the Fringe is on every Tuesday and Friday night from 7 to 8 p.m. on gtv.org MOS Talk.
Right. Always a pleasure and honor, David. So remember to go on gtv.org or download G News app, and we will be back Friday night, 7 p.m., right?
That's right, 7 p.m. Oh, don't forget, Isla and I will be co-hosting this Friday. The events happening, the protesting happening in D.C. as well as in New York City. So there's a collaboration. What they do is they'll have us both up as hosts. We'll show both of the protests going on, and Isla will be interviewing people. We'll be hosting the show, co-hosting the show together this Friday from 9 to 12, correct, Isla?
Right.
Yeah, this Friday from 9 to 12.
So stay tuned, Fringers, and we will definitely invite you guys back on Friday.
That's right. So watch us from 9 to 12 on Friday. And again, and I'll be here with Ada Friday night on the Fringe from 7 to 8. I want to thank you all again for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. God bless all of you and your families. Have a great night. We'll see you soon. Take care. God bless.
Good evening, Fringes.
究竟该由共匪灭在咱的手。好酒，喝了咱的酒啊，看破中共假和丑，喝了咱 中华大地，管天管地管空气，中间还管着你的生殖器。老百姓们活的不如猪狗，人民的财富被他们统统卷走，传统文化全都化为乌有。多少爷们你们难道还没受够？这帮孙子天天在搞双休，这封你的口把你思想左右，看不尽的眼泪不停的流，和谐小康社会我去你个头！喝了咱的酒啊，看破中共假恶丑，喝了咱的酒啊，咱的心爱的自由，喝了咱的酒啊，地头生活一生后，喝了咱的酒啊，不灭恶党誓不休，春天一呀绿油中，真心的共跟我走，好酒啊好酒啊好酒，正义将清酒交到你的手，天南地北从此与我便是战友，我们城市走肉，抗争不分先后，传播天下不管黑夜白昼，干了小碗酒，豪气涌上心头，子孙的未来是我战斗的理由，社区爱恨情仇，不许抛在脑后，为自由灭中共不言不休。报了革命这碗酒，敬天敬地敬战友，新中国联邦人永不为奴，跟我走。神仙阳谷县大县，咱走走看。